So the Athenians were a pragmatic bunch. Yes, the city and its acropolis was dedicated to the goddess Athena. But honestly, as long as a god or a goddess had something to offer to the city, the Athenians would build them a temple. But even those pragmatists had a line they wouldn't cross, and one god they wouldn't accept. At least so they thought. Dionysus, the liberator, the twice born, also better known today to us as the god of wine. But why? Why did the Athenians want to get rid of the soul of the party? The one providing the good drinks?
Because yes, he was famously the god of wine, but that came with a catch. He was also the god of madness. And we aren't talking about a harmless, tipsy kind of crazy. His brand of madness was genuinely dangerous.
Something the Athenians wanted no part of. Why was he considered a mad god? Well, it all has to do with the story of his birth.
Much like, 90% of Greek mythology, Dionysus is the son of Zeus.
And honestly, if Zeus had kept it in his hands, we wouldn't have the mythology we have today.
The unfortunate mortal woman this time was Semele, a princess of Thebes. She had had the misfortune of catching Zeus's eye as she was bathing, and was then thrown into a sordid affair where he visited her only under the cover of pitch-black darkness, making sure she never actually saw his true face. Zeus probably thought his little secret was perfectly safe, but then Semele fell pregnant, and the situation suddenly became much more complicated. Because, you see, Zeus did have a wife, and
Hera was neither a patient goddess nor a forgiving one,
and her vengeance extended to the kids from such liaisons.
She also very much hated all the women who went, willingly or not, into bed with her husband and did her very best to ensure that they would be thoroughly punished.
In this case, Hera decided to approach Semele directly. Much like her husband, she disguised herself as Semele's old nursemaid to gain her trust.
She told Semele that Zeus was very much taken with her and that he would do anything she asked of him.
Why not ask him then to truly reveal himself?
Now, for the sake of the poor mortals, usually gods didn't manifest fully when on Earth.
Zeus preferred to come as a meteorological phenomenon or as an animal, which might explain some of the peculiarities of his children.
The same had happened with Semele.
Because, truth to be told, Zeus's refusal to show his face had also been for Semele's own protection, not just to avoid Hera's wrath. But counseled by Hera, Semele bound Zeus in an unbreakable oath, and then asked him to show her his divine form. Trapped by the promise, Zeus had no choice but to comply.
Divine beings are too much for us poor mortals, and Semele was no exception. When she took in Zeus' divine countenance, she basically burned on the spot.
Semele had paid the price of Hera's vengeance. But Zeus wanted to at least save the baby. He plucked him from Semele's womb and sewed him into his thigh to allow him to grow. Months later, little Dionysus was born again.
And that's why Dionysus is known as the twice born.
This trauma stayed with Dionysus for eternity, eventually defining him as the god of madness.
And this is the madness, the deep frenzy that the Athenians didn't want into their city. And then the city of Eleusis decided to join a political alliance with the city of Athens. And in a token of goodwill, they decided to send to Athens a statue of their patron god. And you know who that was? Dionysus.
But the Athenians had one single answer to such a show of goodwill.
Thanks, but no thanks. Keep your god and his statue outside of our city walls.
The gods are defied at one's peril, Dionysus especially so.
By refusing his statue, they had basically refused him, and that was an insult that Dionysus was not willing to stand. And so the god retaliated in a way that was as mad as the Athenians had always feared.
Every city that had angered him had been sent a plague, usually something that made the women go mad. But Athens was different. In the city that had excluded its women, Dionysus targeted the men. As he was also considered a god of fertility, let's just say the men of Athens got an abundance of pride. With walking suddenly difficult and with no relief from the clearly amused women,
they knew they had to fix things, and fast.
Desperate, they sent an envoy to Delphi, where they were told, in no uncertain terms, and with probably a lot of laughter, that to lift the curse, the Athenians had to welcome the very statue they had told to stay outside their walls.
They immediately sent for the delegation of Elefthausus and told them to bring back the statue of Dionysus, because this time it would be welcome into the city with all the honors. Finally, satisfied by the welcome that he had received, then Dionysus lifted the curse. And from then on, Dionysus was worshipped as Dionysus the Liberator.
Quite possibly the Athenians would have loved to forget all about it, but in a twist of irony, their desperation sparked a cultural revolution, giving rise to Western theatre. Sometimes it's just safer to pour a glass of wine and enjoy the show.